So last year, South Africans took to the polls in the local government elections. As media, we have a mandate to inform and educate the public, providing fair and balanced coverage. Research by Media Monitoring Africa shows that South African media was 96% fair in its coverage. For more on this, we're joined by Azola Dayile from Media Monitoring Africa. Very good afternoon to you, and thank you very much for joining us. So maybe let's start with how this research is compiled.
All right, this is firstly, let me begin by saying that Media Monitoring Africa has been covering local elections since the first democratic elections in South Africa, 1994, and we've been doing this work since then up until now. So how we do this, we use an in-house tool called Dexter, which scrapes for news articles from all over the news sites in South Africa that are available in South Africa, and they are stored into a repository where then specifically trained or specially trained monitors, people that we hire, look through it, analyze it, and place the things accordingly to help us with the research. So we managed to get over 3.7 news items in total. That's looking at the general news media as well as the SABC. So the SABC being the public broadcaster, we looked at it separately from the, other news media because it has a particular mandate that perhaps other news media don't, having it being the public broadcaster. So for them, we had about over 1,000 news items, and then for the general news media, about 39 news publications and platforms, there were about 2.7 news articles. So we then looked at how they covered in terms of representation around gender, race, the geographic spread of news coverage, but in particular election items. So we marked these when we look at this research as election items. So anything that has to do with the elections in the period. I don't know if I can still continue.
I just want to maybe get into the meat of it, right? So you have noted a concern that there was, at the time, only 17% media coverage was election-related, and only 7% was related to service delivery. And you've attributed to the underreporting, or you've attributed the underreporting to the shrinking of newsrooms and hostile economic climate. How did you come to that conclusion?
Okay, so as you rightly mentioned, citizen voices came at a low for both the public broadcaster and the general news media, and what was covered mostly was political party campaigning, party manifestos, and those kind of things. But as you mentioned, that shrinking newsrooms are an issue, but that's not the only issue, because you find that also if you look at the gender representation of our research, you find that women are grossly underrepresented, with only just 20%, and the rest goes to the male voice, which is 80%. But when you look at the people who registered to participate and vote in the elections, 55% were women. And generally, in terms of stats, South Africa, 51% of the total population is female. But we find that in the media, these voices are very much low. I think it's also important to say that this transformation in terms of women's voices in the media has taken a long time, because in 1999, we conducted the very same research, and the women's voice in that research was only at 9%. Now it's around 18%. So almost 2 decades, sort of double that number and get at this low level, because what we're looking at is we want a 50% balance between, genders and sexualities in terms of representation.
Sure. And you speak of representation. You found that the ANC was underrepresented at 41%, while Action SA at 8% was the most overrepresented party.
Yeah, it gets a bit controversial here, and I don't want to make it worse. But how we look at this, we look at it in relation to the vote share received. So if you know that the ANC received in the previous elections about 47% share of the vote, and then they are then underrepresented if they only were 41% share of the voices within the news medias or within SABC. And for Action SA got 1.8 share of the total vote in the previous elections, but there was a lot of media coverage around them, around 8% in news media and 5% in the SABC. But also, if you remember, there were a lot of issues that made Action SA to be in the fore of the media. There was the Equality Court case, where they took the IEC to the Equality Court because on the ballot paper they had appeared with, I think, a wrong acronym, and also their logo was not correct. But also they were at the forefront of things like Put South Africa First, which, were receiving a lot of coverage during this period of elections, which was a 62-day monitoring period that we covered.
What did your analysis show where the Democratic Alliance was concerned at the time, remembering the Phoenix posters that they had? What was the impact on them?
So also, I'm glad that you mentioned the fact of Phoenix, because I think with the general news media outside of the public broadcaster, they received a 24% vote share compared to the 20% vote share that they received. So they were grossly overrepresented by 5% in the general news media, but they were quite adequately represented in SABC, or slightly underrepresented by 1%, because SABC only gave them 19% of the voice share during that debacle of Phoenix. So that might have been the reason why there was such, a discrepancy between the public broadcaster and the general news media in terms of covering the DA during this election period.
In trying to understand overall, because you found that generally South African media did well with the coverage of the elections, but why does this matter?
Pardon?
Why does it matter?
That the media does a great job in covering elections. I mean, what drives us in doing our research is the question that what does the electorate know and what does the electorate need to know? And it's important, if you know, that people have rights to access to information, and not just any information, but adequate information. So it is important that the media then play this role to cover elections, cover party manifestos, but also not just that, because elections are not just about political parties, but citizens themselves, which is worrying why citizen voices were so underrepresented. So also going into communities, have dedicated programs that speak to election issues, community issues. So it's quite important that citizens and community voices are also out there, and they can only be out there if the media, does this role of adequately covering political parties, but also, giving access to communities and members of the public.
Fair enough. Azola Dayile is the Program Manager, Advocacy, Lobbying and Litigation. Thank you very much for joining us. Media Monitoring Africa's report on media coverage during the 2021 local government elections.